Preston adjusted his silk tie in the reflection of the lobby glass, watching his wife, no, his ex-wife, crumple onto the cold Manhattan sidewalk. He smirked, convinced he had just shed the last anchor, dragging him down. He had the penthouse, the promotion, and the younger mistress waiting upstairs. He thought he had won. He thought Vivian was nobody. But he didn't check the black Maybach, idling silently at the curb. He didn't know that the woman he just kicked out was about to answer a phone call that would make his entire net worth look like pocket change. The sound of the heavy oak door slamming shut echoed like a gunshot through the hallway of the penthouse at 432 Park Avenue. Vivian stared at the wood, the grain swimming before her tear-filled eyes. At her feet lay 2 suitcases, scuffed, cheap, and bulging at the seams. They contained 10 years of marriage, packed frantically in under 20 minutes. And don't bother buzzing the concierge. Preston's voice was muffled through the door, but the mockery was crystal clear. I've already had your access revoked. You're a guest who's overstayed her welcome. Vivian raised a trembling hand to knock, to beg, to ask for just one more night to figure things out. But she stopped herself. She could hear laughter from inside. A woman's laughter, high, light, and cruel. Isabella. It wasn't a surprise, really. Vivian had smelled the sickly sweet scent of Baccarat Rouge 540 on Preston's collars for months. She had seen the way he hid his phone screen, the way he suddenly had late dinners with clients at Le Bernardin 3 times a week. But she had stayed. She had stayed because she believed in the vows she made when they were both broke students sharing a studio in Queens. She had scrubbed floors, worked double shifts at a diner, and supported him while he finished his MBA. She had built him up, brick by brick. And now that he was a vice president at Harrow and Finch, a top-tier private equity firm, she was merely a reminder of the grime he wanted to wash off. Go back to the trailer park. Vivian, Preston shouted one last time. You never really fit in here anyway. The lock clicked. The deadbolt slid home with finality. Vivian took a shaky breath, wiping her cheeks. She grabbed the handles of her suitcases. They were heavy, filled with her old clothes, the ones Preston hated because they lacked sophistication. She dragged them toward the elevator, the wheels rumbling loudly on the marble floor. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like a descent into hell. The mirrored walls reflected her red, puffy eyes and her messy bun. She looked exhausted. She looked defeated. She looked exactly like what Preston said she was, a nobody. When the doors opened, the doorman, Henry, looked away. He had always been kind to her, sneaking her umbrellas on rainy days. But today, his posture was stiff. I'm sorry, Mrs. Ford, Henry murmured as she passed the desk. Mr. Ford gave strict instructions. You're not to re-enter the building once you leave. It's okay, Henry, Vivian whispered, her voice cracking. It's not your fault. She pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out into the biting October wind of New York City. The noise of the city hit her instantly, horns blaring, sirens in the distance, the relentless hum of millions of people fighting to survive. She dragged her bags to the curb and stopped. Where would she go? She had $60 in her bank account. Preston had drained their joint account to protect his assets, pending the divorce. She had no family. Her parents had passed away years ago in Ohio, leaving her with nothing but debts. She looked up at the towering needle of the building she used to call home. In the window of the penthouse, 90 floors up, she imagined Preston pouring champagne, celebrating his freedom. "Well," she said aloud to no one, her voice hardening slightly. "I survived before him. I'll survive after him." But the bravado was thin. She was shivering. She pulled her thin coat tighter around herself. She needed a plan. She needed a cheap motel. She needed a miracle. A sleek, obsidian black car pulled up to the curb, gliding silently like a shark through dark water. It wasn't a taxi. It was a Mercedes Maybach S-Class, the kind of car that cost more than most houses. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like ink. Vivian stepped back, assuming she was blocking the entrance for some VIP. She tried to drag her suitcases out of the way. "Sorry," she muttered, tugging at a stuck wheel. The rear door of the car opened. A man stepped out. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, dressed in a bespoke three-piece charcoal suit that screamed old-world money. He had silver hair swept back perfectly, and he held a leather briefcase with brass fittings. He didn't look like a driver. He looked like a statesman. He looked directly at her. "Mrs. Vivian Ford." He asked. His voice was deep, calm, and carried a clipped, mid-Atlantic accent that commanded attention. Vivian froze. "Yes, who are you? Did Preston send you?" The man allowed a faint, wintry smile to touch his lips. "Mr. Preston Ford has nothing to do with this. Madam. In fact, Mr. Ford is the reason I am here now, rather than tomorrow. My name is Arthur Montgomery. I am the senior partner at Montgomery, Hale and Locke." Vivian blinked. Montgomery. Hale and Locke. Even she knew that name. It was the most exclusive law firm in the city. They didn't handle divorces. They handled mergers, acquisitions, and the estates of billionaires. "I don't have money for a lawyer," Vivian said, gripping her suitcase handle. "If Preston is suing me, you can tell him he already took everything." Arthur Montgomery stepped closer, ignoring the bustle of Park Avenue around them. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax. "I am not here to sue you, Vivian," Arthur said softly, using her first name with a strange, paternal familiarity. "I am here to execute the final clause of the Wellington Trust." "The what?" Vivian asked, confused. "I think you have the wrong person. My maiden name is Miller. I'm nobody." "You are Vivian Miller, daughter of James and Martha Miller," Arthur recited. "But your mother, Martha, was not born a Miller. She was born Martha Wellington. She ran away from her family home in Newport 40 years ago to marry a mechanic against her father's wishes. She changed her name, cut all ties, and never spoke of her origins again." Vivian felt the ground sway beneath her. My mum. She was a waitress. We lived in a 2-bedroom rental in Dayton." "She was a woman of great principle," Arthur said, bowing his head slightly. "But she was also the only child of Alistair Wellington, the shipping magnate, the real estate tycoon, the man who built half of the skyline you are currently looking at." Vivian laughed. A short, hysterical sound. "This is a joke. Preston put you up to this, to humiliate me one last time." "No joke, madam," Arthur said. He gestured to the open door of the Maybach. "Your grandfather, Alistair, passed away 3 days ago. He spent the last 20 years trying to find your mother. When we finally located her, we found she had passed, but we found you." Arthur paused, his eyes gleaming with a strange intensity. "The terms of the will were specific. If you were happily married, you were to receive a generous trust fund, $5 million. But if you were found to be in distress, if you had been abandoned or mistreated. Arthur glanced up at the penthouse balcony, then back at her suitcases. Then the clause of total reversion activates. Vivian's heart hammered against her ribs. What does that mean? It means, Arthur said, extending a hand to help her into the car, that you don't just get $5 million. Vivian, you get everything. The shipping lines, the portfolio, the Wellington estate. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. And that includes the ownership deed to the building at 432 Park Avenue. Technically, as of signatures exchanged 10 minutes ago, you are now your husband's landlord. Vivian sat in the back of the Maybach, the smell of rich leather and chilled air conditioning enveloping her. It was a stark contrast to the grit of the sidewalk she had been standing on seconds ago. Her suitcases, the cheap, scuffed ones, had been loaded into the trunk by a driver who treated them as if they were made of gold. Arthur Montgomery sat across from her, opening the leather briefcase. He pulled out a tablet and a gold fountain pen. "I know this is a shock," Arthur said, his tone gentle but businesslike. "But time is of the essence. The Wellington Board of Directors is currently in a panic. They know Alistair has died, but they don't know who the heir is. They are expecting a corporate takeover. We need to secure your position immediately." Vivian looked at her hands. They were shaking. I can't process this. My mother was a Wellington. Why didn't she tell me? We struggled so much. There were nights we ate toast for dinner because we couldn't afford groceries. She wanted to be free, Arthur said. The Wellingtons are a complicated family. Your grandfather was a hard man. Your mother chose love over money. It was a noble choice, but it had consequences. However, Alistair regretted his hardness in his final years. He watched you from afar. Vivian. Vivian's head snapped up. He watched me. Private investigators, Arthur admitted. He knew you married Preston Ford. He knew Preston was ambitious. He didn't trust him. That is why the will was structured this way. Alistair wanted to ensure that if you were with a man who loved you for you, you would have a comfortable life. But if you were with a man who discarded you, well, Alistair wanted to make sure you had the power to crush him. Vivian felt a chill run down her spine. Crush him. Figuratively speaking, Arthur said, though his eyes twinkled with something that suggested otherwise. Or literally, that is entirely up to you now. He tapped the tablet screen. Currently, your net worth is estimated at approximately $4.2 billion. Liquid assets are around $600 million. The rest is in real estate, shipping logistics, and technology holdings. Vivian gasped. The air left her lungs. Billion. With a B, Arthur confirmed. Now, regarding your immediate situation, you are homeless. Technically, yes, Vivian whispered. No, Arthur corrected. You own the penthouse at the Pierre Hotel. It is kept permanently reserved for the head of the family. We can take you there. However, Arthur paused, looking at the tablet. There is the matter of 432 Park Avenue. Vivian looked out the tinted window. They hadn't moved yet. She could still see the entrance. She saw Preston walk out the front door. He was laughing, his arm around Isabella. Isabella was wearing a white fur coat, a coat Preston had promised Vivian for her birthday last year, but never bought. They were walking toward Preston's Porsche. He's going to dinner, Vivian said, her voice hollow. Probably to Père Se. Arthur tapped the intercom button. Driver, hold position. He turned to Vivian. Vivian, As the majority owner of the Skyline Management Group, which owns 432 Park Avenue, you have the right to inspect your property at any time. You also have the right to determine who has access to the amenities. Vivian watched Preston open the car door for Isabella. He looked so smug, so untouchable. He told me I was a guest who overstayed her welcome, Vivian said, the memory of his words stinging like acid. An error in judgment, Arthur said dryly. Would you like to correct him? Vivian looked at the lawyer. For 10 years, she had been the quiet wife, the supportive wife, the wife who apologized when he had a bad day, the wife who made herself smaller so his ego would fit in the room. She looked at Preston again. He was checking his watch, a Rolex she had saved for 2 years to buy him as a graduation gift. He didn't even look back at the building where he had left her. Something inside Vivian snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet click of a steel trap setting into place. Arthur, she said, her voice steady for the first time. What exactly does being the landlord entail? It means you control the leases, Arthur said. It means you control the staff. It means you control the security protocols. And the penthouse lease, Preston Ford rents it, Arthur said, consulting a file. The lease is up for renewal next month. However, there is a standard clause in all Skyline luxury leases, the conduct unbecoming clause. It allows the landlord to terminate a lease immediately if the tenant engages in behavior that disrupts the prestige or moral standing of the building. Vivian looked at Preston, who was now kissing Isabella passionately on the sidewalk, right in front of the doorman. Is kicking your wife out on the street considered conduct unbecoming? Vivian asked. Arthur smiled, a shark-like grin that showed all his teeth. In my legal opinion, madam, it is the definition of it. Vivian sat back. I don't want to go to the Pierre. Arthur. No. No, Vivian said. I want to go to the penthouse. My penthouse. Arthur picked up the car phone. I will call the building manager. He works for you now. I believe his name is Mr. Henderson. I will inform him that the owner is coming up for an immediate inspection and that the current tenant is to be removed. Wait, Vivian said. Arthur paused. Changed your mind? No, Vivian said. She watched Preston's Porsche roar to life. Let him go to dinner. Let him spend $300 on appetizers. Let him think he's the king of New York for 1 more hour. I want to be in the apartment when he gets back, and I want the locks changed before dessert is served. Arthur's smile widened. A strategic choice. Alistair would have been proud. And Arthur, yes, Vivian. Does the Wellington estate own any clothing stores? Arthur chuckled. Madam, the Wellington estate owns the holding company that owns Bergdorf Goodman. Vivian looked down at her worn-out jeans and thrift store sweater. Then we have a stop to make first. If I'm going to evict my husband, I'm not going to do it looking like this. Driver, Arthur commanded. To 5th Avenue. Step on it. The Maybach pulled away from the curb, gliding past Preston's Porsche just as he pulled into traffic. Preston didn't even glance at the black car. He had no idea that the woman inside it had just bought his future, and she was about to cancel it. The drive to 5th Avenue was a blur of neon lights and wet pavement. But inside the Maybach, the atmosphere was one of calculated precision. Arthur Montgomery spent the ride on his phone, speaking in low, rapid-fire French, then German, then English. He was moving mountains with whispers. When the car glided to a stop in front of Bergdorf Goodman, the store was technically 20 minutes from closing. The windows were dark, the displays of headless mannequins draped in Oscar de la Renta, and Valentino looming like silent sentinels. "It's closed, Arthur," Vivian said, clutching her purse. "We can't go in. For the public, it is closed," Arthur corrected, unbuckling his seatbelt. "For the owner of the controlling interest in the Wellington Retail Group, the doors are never closed." A security guard stepped out of the shadows of the entrance. He looked ready to wave them away, but then he saw the license plate. He saw Arthur step out. He saw the way Arthur held himself. The guard tapped his earpiece. The glass doors swung open, and a man in an immaculate navy suit came rushing out. "Monsieur Montgomery," the man gasped, bowing slightly. "We received your call only moments ago. I am Jean-Luc, the floor director. We are entirely at your disposal." Arthur gestured to the car. "Jean-Luc, this is Mrs. Vivian Miller. She is the granddaughter of Alistair Wellington. She requires a wardrobe, not for a gala, not for a dinner." Arthur's eyes narrowed. "She requires a wardrobe for a war." Jean-Luc looked at Vivian. He took in her scuffed sneakers, her frayed jeans, and her tear-streaked face. But he didn't sneer. He was a professional, and he knew that in New York, the person who looked the poorest often held the most power. "It would be an honor, Madame," Jean-Luc said, offering his arm. Vivian stepped out of the car. For the first time in 10 years, she didn't feel the need to shrink. She took Jean-Luc's arm. Inside. The store was silent, a cathedral of commerce. The air smelled of expensive lilies and floor wax. Staff members were hurriedly being called back from the locker rooms, lining up in the grand foyer. "We will start on the 3rd floor," Jean-Luc announced. "Designer collections." The next 2 hours were a fever dream. Vivian stood on a pedestal in a private dressing suite, while 3 assistants circled her like birds of prey. Pinning, tucking, and zipping. "Too soft," Arthur said from a velvet armchair, rejecting a floral Gucci dress. "That says, 'Forgive me.' We need a dress that says, 'You are already dead.'" Vivian looked at herself in the tri-fold mirror. The woman staring back was exhausted. Yes. But the expensive fabrics against her skin were waking something up in her. "I don't want a dress," Vivian said suddenly. The assistants froze. Arthur raised an eyebrow. "No. No," Vivian said. She thought about Preston. She thought about his crisp suits, his ties, the way he used his appearance as a weapon of authority. "I want a suit. I want to look like I own the building, not like I'm decorating it." Jean-Luc snapped his fingers. "Tom Ford, the white collection, bring it. Now." When Vivian stepped out 10 minutes later, the room went silent. She was wearing a razor-sharp, snow-white tuxedo suit. The jacket was tailored to within a millimeter of her life, accentuating a waist she hadn't realized she still had. The trousers were wide-legged and fluid, moving like liquid silk. Underneath, she wore nothing but a diamond choker that Jean-Luc had pulled from the vault. She looked like a blade, cold, sharp, and beautiful. "Perfect," Arthur whispered. "The shoes," Vivian said, looking at her sneakers. "I need height. I need to look him in the eye." They brought her Louboutins, so Kate 120S in nude patent leather. When she slipped them on, she grew 4 inches taller. Her posture shifted, her chin lifted. "How do I look?" she asked. "You look like a CEO," Arthur said, "which is appropriate, since you are one." While Vivian was being fitted, Arthur had been busy. He had set up a command center on a glass coffee table. He had files spread out, financial documents, bank statements, and legal briefs. "Vivian," Arthur said, motioning her over, "while you were changing, I had our forensic accountants run a preliminary sweep of Preston's finances. We needed to know what we were dealing with before we engaged the enemy." Vivian sat down carefully, not wanting to crease the white suit. "Is it bad? He always told me money was tight, that we had to save." Arthur slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of a bank statement from an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. "Preston has been siphoning money from his firm's bonus pool into this private account for 3 years," Arthur said. "But more importantly, he has been using your identity to secure high-risk loans." Vivian felt the blood drain from her face. "What?" "He took out a second mortgage on your parents' old house in Ohio before selling it. He forged your signature on 3 credit cards, which he maxed out to pay for his Porsche. And the lease on the penthouse. It's in your name." Vivian stared at the paper. "But he pays the rent. He told me he put it in my name to build my credit score. He put it in your name so that if he ever stopped paying, you would be the one liable for the $40,000 a month," Arthur explained grimly. "He set you up as his fall guy. Vivian, if his risky trades at work went south, he planned to declare bankruptcy and leave you with the debt." The tears that had threatened to spill earlier simply evaporated. They were replaced by a cold, hard knot of fury in her stomach. He hadn't just fallen out of love with her. He had been using her. He had been effectively stealing from her while she clipped coupons and cooked his meals. "He's a criminal," Vivian said, her voice shaking with rage. "He is a liability," Arthur corrected, "and liabilities must be liquidated." Arthur checked his watch. "It is 9:30 p.m. Preston's reservation at Per Se was for 8 p.m. Knowing his ego, he will stretch dinner to 3 hours. That gives us 90 minutes to prepare the stage." Vivian stood up. She caught her reflection in the glass of the window. The white suit glowed in the dim light. She didn't look like Vivian Miller, the waitress's daughter, anymore. She looked like Vivian Wellington. "Let's go," she said. "I want to be sitting in his chair when he walks in." "One last thing," Arthur said. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a black card made of anodized titanium. The Centurion card, linked to the main trust. There is no limit. You might need to tip the doorman. Vivian took the card. It felt heavy and cold. "Arthur." "Yes. Does the building have a service elevator?" "It does." "Good," Vivian said, a dark smile playing on her lips. "Make sure it's working. I have some trash to take out." The return to 432 Park Avenue was nothing like the departure. The Maybach pulled up, and this time 3 doormen rushed to open the door. Arthur had called ahead. The management of the building had been informed that the owner was arriving, and that there had been a severe clerical error regarding her treatment earlier that day. When Vivian stepped out in her white suit, the wind whipping her hair, which had been slicked back into a severe chic chignon, Henry the doorman looked like he was about to faint. "Mrs. Ford. I mean, Miss Miller." "Ma'am," Henry stammered, wringing his hands. "I'm so terribly sorry about earlier. Mr. Ford was very insistent, and I—" Vivian stopped. She looked at Henry. She remembered that he had a daughter in college. She remembered he had bad knees. "It's all right, Henry," she said coolly. "You were doing your job as you understood it, but the rules have changed. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Ma'am, is Mr. Ford back yet?" "No. Ma'am, the Porsche is still gone." "Good." Vivian walked into the lobby, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble. Waiting by the elevators was a short, sweating man in an ill-fitting suit. This was Mr. Henderson, the building manager. He looked like a man facing a firing squad. "Mrs. Wellington," Henderson squeaked. "Welcome home. I cannot express how honored we are." "Save it, Henderson," Arthur barked, stepping up beside Vivian. "We need access to the security grid, and we need the locks on Penthouse B reprogrammed immediately. The current tenant's key fobs are to be deactivated." "Done, already done," Henderson said, tapping a tablet. "And, regarding the staff, send everyone home except security," Vivian said. "I want the floor empty." They rode the elevator in silence. The numbers ticked up 10, 20, 50, 80. With every floor, Vivian felt her heart rate steadying. She wasn't nervous. She was focused when the elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse. The apartment was dark. The city lights flooded in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the modern furniture. It smelled of him. That musky, expensive cologne. It smelled of her Isabella's cloying perfume hung in the foyer. Vivian walked to the wall panel and hit the lights. The apartment blazed to life. "Arthur," Vivian said, walking into the living room. "I want everything of his packed. Everything." "I have a team on standby," Arthur said. He spoke into his phone. "Send them up." Within minutes, 4 men in grey coveralls entered from the service entrance. They moved with the efficiency of a pit crew. They went into the master bedroom, the closet, the bathroom. Vivian stood in the center of the room, watching. She saw them take his suits, the Brioni suits she had ironed 1,000 times. She saw them take his watch collection. She saw them take the framed photo of him receiving his Executive of the Year award. "Where do you want this, Ms. Wellington?" one of the movers asked, holding a box of Preston's toiletries. "The service elevator hallway," Vivian said. "Leave it all in the hall." "Ms. Wellington," Arthur said, approaching her with a tablet. "I have just received a notification. Preston's credit card was just declined at Per Se." Vivian turned, her eyes widening. "You froze his accounts." "I froze your joint account," Arthur corrected. "The one he drained. I filed an emergency injunction claiming theft of marital assets. The bank froze everything associated with his social security number, pending an investigation. It took about 12 minutes. Vivian laughed. It was a genuine laugh this time. "He's going to be furious." "He is going to be embarrassed," Arthur said. "He likely had to call his mistress to pay." "Isabella paying for dinner." Vivian shook her head. "She'll hate that. She dates him for the lifestyle, not the charity." "He's on his way back," Arthur said, watching a GPS tracker on the tablet. "He's driving fast." Vivian walked over to the liquor cabinet. She poured herself a glass of sparkling water. She didn't need alcohol. She needed clarity. She walked to the massive leather armchair that sat facing the view of Central Park. It was Preston's throne. He never let anyone else sit there. "It's my thinking chair. Viv," he would say. Vivian sat in it. It was comfortable. She crossed her legs, the white trousers glowing in the ambient light. She rested her hands on the armrests. "Arthur, you should probably wait in the study," Vivian said. "I want to handle this part alone." "Are you sure, madam? He can be volatile." "I have security downstairs, don't I?" "You have a small army downstairs," Arthur assured her. "Then I'll be fine. I need him to see me. Just me." Arthur nodded and retreated into the shadows of the library, leaving the door slightly ajar. Vivian waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Then the elevator chimed. Vivian didn't turn around. She kept her eyes on the skyline. The doors slid open. She heard the heavy footsteps of Preston Ford. He was stomping. "Damn piece of junk fob!" Preston shouted, kicking the door frame as he entered. "Henderson, why didn't the fob work? I had to use the keypad." He stormed into the foyer, throwing his keys onto the console table. "And why are there boxes in the hallway?" Preston yelled, his voice echoing. "Isabella, baby, wait in the hall a second. I think the movers didn't finish taking out the trash." He walked into the living room, loosening his tie. He looked disheveled. His face was red, likely from the wine and the embarrassment of the declined card. "Vivian," he shouted, not seeing her yet. "Are you still here? I swear to God. If you're hiding in the guest room, I'm going to drag you out by your hair." Vivian swiveled the chair slowly. The motion was smooth, deliberate, and theatrical. She turned until she was facing him directly. Preston froze. He blinked. He looked at the woman sitting in his chair. He looked at the white tuxedo suit. He looked at the diamonds around her neck. He looked at the shoes. "Who?" Preston started, then squinted. "Vivian." "Hello, Preston," she said. Her voice was an octave lower than he was used to. It was calm. It was terrifying. "What are you wearing?" Preston asked, his confusion overriding his anger for a second. "Where did you get that suit, and why are you sitting in my chair?" "It's a comfortable chair," Vivian observed, running a hand along the leather. "I can see why you like it. It makes you feel important." Preston's face darkened. The shock was wearing off, replaced by his usual arrogance. He marched toward her. "I told you to get out," he snarled. "I kicked you out 3 hours ago. How did you get back in? Did you seduce Henry? Did you beg?" He stopped 3 feet from her, looming over her. "Get up. Get your trashy bags and get out before I call the police." "My bags are gone. Preston," Vivian said, not flinching. "But yours are packed." "What?" "I packed for you," Vivian said. "Well, I had people do it. The grey coveralls. Did you see them? They're very efficient." Preston laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "You packed my bags. You think you can kick me out? This is my apartment. My name is on the lease." Vivian took a sip of her water. "Actually, Preston, that's not entirely true. The lease is in my name. You told me so yourself. Remember, to build my credit." Preston scoffed. "So what I pay the rent, I make the money. You're nothing without me. Viv, you're a leech." "And the building," Vivian continued, ignoring him. "The building has a very strict policy about tenants who disturb the peace, or who can't pay their bills." "I can pay my bills," Preston shouted. The card reader at the restaurant was broken. "Was it?" Vivian asked. "Or was the account frozen because of a fraud investigation?" Preston went still. "What did you say?" "Fraud," Vivian repeated. "Embezzlement. Identity theft. Second mortgages taken out without spousal consent." She stood up. She rose slowly, the heels giving her the height she needed. She looked him dead in the eye. "You see, Preston, I had a very interesting afternoon. While you were eating appetizers you couldn't afford, I was finding out who I really am." "You're crazy," Preston whispered, backing away slightly. "You've lost your mind." "No," Vivian said, taking a step forward. "I found my grandfather." "Your grandfather is dead." Preston spat. "He was a drunk from Ohio." "My father was from Ohio," Vivian corrected. "My mother was a Wellington." Preston frowned. "Wellington like the bank?" "Like the bank. Like the shipping line, like the building we are standing in right now, Vivian said. Her voice was hard as diamond. I own this building, Preston. I own the ground you're standing on. I own the mortgage on your Porsche. I own the firm that just bought your private equity group 10 minutes ago. Preston's mouth opened, but no sound came out. And you, Vivian said, leaning in close enough to smell the fear on him, are trespassing. At that moment, the elevator dinged again. Isabella walked in. She looked annoyed, tapping her phone. Preston, seriously, what is going on? The hallway is full of boxes, and some security guard just told me I have to leave. Isabella looked up. She saw Vivian. She saw the white suit. She saw the diamonds. She saw the power radiating off the woman she had laughed at hours ago. Isabella stopped. She looked at Preston, who was pale and sweating. She looked back at Vivian. "Hi," Isabella said, her voice small. "Hello, Isabella," Vivian said pleasantly. "You might want to grab your coat. It's cold outside, and Preston won't be driving you home. I'm taking the Porsche back." Vivian turned back to her husband. "You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises. Preston, if you're not out, the security team will escort you, and trust me, they aren't as gentle as Henry." Preston looked at her, searching for the weak, submissive wife he had known. He searched for the woman who begged for his attention. He found only a stranger who could crush him. "Viv," he stammered, his voice cracking. "Baby, wait. Let's talk about this. We're married. We can fix this." Vivian smiled. It was the smile of a queen dismissing a jester. "Talk to my lawyer," she said. She snapped her fingers. From the library, Arthur Montgomery stepped out, holding a thick file. From the service entrance, 4 burly security guards stepped into the light. "Mr. Ford," Arthur said, his voice smooth and deadly, "I believe you know the way out." The morning sun hit the pavement of Wall Street with a glare that felt particularly harsh to Preston Ford. He hadn't slept. After being escorted out of 432 Park Avenue by 4 men who looked like they chewed gravel for breakfast, he had spent the night on a leather sofa in the lobby of a mid-tier hotel in Midtown because his credit cards were still frozen. He adjusted his suit, the same one he'd worn yesterday, now wrinkled and smelling faintly of stale scotch. He needed to get to the office. Harrow and Finch was his sanctuary. It was the one place where he was still a king, where his title of vice president meant something. Vivian could take the apartment. She could freeze the joint account, but she couldn't touch his career. He was the top earner. He was untouchable. He walked into the lobby of the skyscraper, nodding at the security guard. "Ralph." "Morning, Ralph," Preston said, forcing a confident smile. Ralph didn't smile back. He looked down at his clipboard. "Mr. Ford, can you step to the side, please?" Preston frowned. "Excuse me, I have a 9 a.m. meeting with the partners." "Your badge has been flagged, sir," Ralph said, his voice devoid of its usual deference. "I can't let you up to the 40th floor. "Flagged?" Preston's laugh was brittle. "Don't be ridiculous. I'm a VP. Call my assistant, Jessica. Tell her to come down here and sort this out." "Jessica isn't answering, sir. But Mr. Sterling, Mr. Blackwood from HR is coming down." Preston felt a cold sweat prickle his neck. Blackwood, the head of HR, never came down to the lobby. 5 minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and Thomas Blackwood stepped out. He was a grim-faced man who usually only appeared when someone was being fired for cause. Flanking him were 2 more security guards. "Thomas," Preston said, stepping forward with feigned bravado. "What is this nonsense? My wife is having some sort of manic episode and froze my cards. And now this, I have a merger to close." "You don't have a merger, Preston," Thomas said quietly. He handed Preston a cardboard box. It was empty. "What is this?" "We packed your personal effects," Thomas said. "Your laptop and company phone have been seized pending a forensic audit. You are being placed on immediate unpaid suspension, effective 8:00 a.m. this morning." "Suspension," Preston shouted, causing heads to turn in the busy lobby. "For what I made this firm $20 million last quarter. For insider trading, embezzlement, and conduct violating the morality clause of your contract." Thomas recited, "We received a dossier last night. It was extensive. It detailed the offshore accounts in the Caymans. It detailed the loans taken out in your wife's name. And it detailed the unauthorized use of client funds to cover personal gambling debts." Preston felt the floor sway. "Who sent it? Who sent the dossier?" Thomas looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. "The new majority shareholder of Harrow and Finch." Preston blinked. "The partners own the firm. We don't have a majority shareholder." "We do as of this morning," Thomas said. "A private holding company called Wellington Miller Global acquired a 51% controlling stake in a hostile buyout at dawn. They bought out the senior partners for triple the market value." Wellington Miller. The name hit Preston like a physical blow. She bought the company. Preston whispered. "She didn't just buy it." "Preston," Thomas said, turning to walk away. "She's upstairs right now. She called an all-hands meeting. She's auditing every account you ever touched." Preston dropped the box. He didn't care about the scene he was making. He pushed past Ralph, sprinting toward the turnstiles. "Hey!" Ralph shouted. "Stop him." Preston vaulted the turnstile, his suit jacket tearing on the metal bar. He scrambled for the elevators, hitting the button frantically. He had to see her. He had to stop her. She was ruining his life. The doors opened. He shoved his way inside, ignoring the startled looks of two interns. He pressed 40. When the doors opened on the 41st floor, the office was silent. Usually, the trading floor was a hive of shouting and ringing phones. Today, everyone was standing in the glass-walled conference room. Preston ran toward the glass. Inside, at the head of the massive mahogany table where the CEO usually sat, was Vivian. She wasn't wearing the white suit anymore. Today, she wore a blood-red dress that looked like it was cut from liquid ruby. Her hair was down, cascading in waves over her shoulders. She looked vibrant. She looked dangerous. Standing next to her was Arthur Montgomery, looking like her executioner. Preston slammed his hand against the glass door. "Vivian, you can't do this." The room turned. 50 employees, traders, analysts, secretaries looked at him. They saw his torn jacket, his wild eyes, his sweat-drenched face. Vivian didn't flinch. She pressed a button on the intercom. "Let him in." Her voice echoed through the room. The door clicked open. Preston stumbled in. "You're crazy," he panted, pointing a shaking finger at her. "You can't buy a firm just to fire your husband. That's illegal. It's market manipulation." Vivian leaned back in the leather chair. She looked at the board of directors, who were sitting around the table looking pale and terrified. "Gentlemen," Vivian said calmly, "is this the man who managed the pension fund account?" "Yes." "Ms. Wellington," the CEO muttered, avoiding Preston's eyes. "And is this the man?" Vivian continued, holding up a file. who used the pension fund to short-sell stock in his own clients' companies, pocketing the difference in an account named PF Holdings. The room gasped. That was a federal crime. That was prison time. "I never did that," Preston screamed. "That's a lie. She's forging documents. We have the IP logs." "Preston," Arthur interjected smoothly. "We traced the trades to your laptop, to your login, at times when you were supposedly at client dinners, which we now know were dates with Ms. Isabella Rossi." Preston froze. Vivian stood up. The red dress rustled softly in the silence. "I didn't buy this company to fire you, Preston," she said, her voice carrying to the back of the room. "I bought it to save it. Because if the SEC found out about what you did before we cleaned it up, every person in this room would lose their job. I bought it to purge the rot." She walked around the table, stopping inches from him. "You told me I was nothing," she whispered, low enough that only he could hear. "You told me I was a burden. But it turns out I was the only thing keeping you afloat. And now that I'm gone, you're sinking." She turned to the security guards. "Get him out of my building and call the district attorney. I believe they have some questions for Mr. Ford regarding wire fraud." As the guards grabbed Preston's arms, he didn't fight. He just looked at Vivian. He looked at the woman who used to make him coffee and fold his socks. And he realized, with a terrifying clarity, that he never really knew her at all. 2 weeks had passed since the incident at Harrow and Finch. The story had dominated the news cycle. The Cinderella of Park Avenue. The headlines read, "From discarded wife to billionaire baroness." Vivian had stayed out of the public eye, holed up in the penthouse, working with Arthur and a team of advisors to untangle the mess of the Wellington estate. But tonight was different. Tonight was the Metropolitan Winter Gala. It was the most exclusive event of the season, a place where the city's elite came to preen and plot. It was also Vivian's official debut as the head of the Wellington family. The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was dripping in crystals and gold. A string quartet played softly in the corner. The air smelled of expensive champagne and desperation. When Vivian arrived, the room went silent. She wore a custom gown by Elie Saab, a shimmering cascade of midnight blue velvet and diamonds that made her look like the night sky brought to life. On her neck sat the Wellington sapphire, a stone the size of a pigeon's egg that hadn't been seen in public for 40 years. She walked in with Arthur on her arm. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. "Don't look at them," Arthur murmured. "Look through them. You are the view. Vivian. They are just the spectators." Vivian kept her head high. She spotted the social climbers immediately. Women who had ignored her at previous parties when she was just Preston's wife now rushed forward, beaming with fake warmth. "Vivian, darling," chirped Mrs. van der Hoven, a woman who had once spilled wine on Vivian and not apologized. "It is so good to see you. We must do lunch. I always said you had such a regal bearing." "Thank you, Clarissa," Vivian said with a polite, distant smile. "My schedule is quite full with the acquisition, but I'll have my assistant note your interest." She moved on before Clarissa could respond. She made her way through the room, shaking hands with senators, tech moguls, and old money matriarchs. She played the part perfectly. She was charming, witty, and enigmatic. But the night wasn't over. Near the bar, a commotion broke out. A glass shattered. Voices were raised. Vivian turned to see a disheveled figure arguing with the bartender. It was Preston. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. His suit was ill-fitting. He was clearly drunk. He had managed to slip past security, likely using an old pass or a bribe he couldn't afford. "I need a drink!" Preston shouted, slamming his hand on the bar. "Do you know who I am? I'm Preston Ford. I'm the reason half these people are rich." The music stopped. The crowd murmured, pulling out their phones to record. Vivian felt Arthur tense beside her. "I'll have security remove him." "No," Vivian said, handing Arthur her champagne glass. "Let me." She walked across the dance floor. The crowd separated, creating a corridor between her and her husband. Preston saw her coming. He straightened up, trying to regain some dignity. He smoothed his hair, but his hand was shaking. "Well, well," Preston sneered, his speech slurred. "If it isn't the Queen of New York. Look at you, all dressed up in your grandfather's blood money." "Go home, Preston," Vivian said calmly. "You're making a scene." "Home," Preston laughed bitterly. "I don't have a home. You took it. You took my apartment. You took my job. You took my friends. Even Isabella left me. She called me a loser. Viv, can you believe that?" He stumbled toward her. "You ruined me. And for what? Because I fell in love with someone else. Because I wanted to be happy." "You didn't want to be happy," Vivian said, her voice ringing clear in the silent ballroom. "You wanted to be powerful, and you used me to get there. You didn't leave me because you fell in love. Preston, you kicked me out because you thought you had extracted every ounce of value from me. You thought I was empty." She took a step closer, the sapphire at her throat catching the light. "But you forgot one thing. You can't break something that was forged in fire. I survived poverty. I survived my parents' death. I survived 10 years of your neglect. You didn't ruin me, Preston. You released me." Preston stared at her. The rage in his eyes flickered, replaced by a deep, crushing sadness. He looked around the room. He saw the faces of the people he had tried so hard to impress, the bankers, the socialites. They weren't looking at him with respect. They were looking at him with pity. "Viv," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Please, I have nothing. Help me. Just a loan. A small loan. I can pay you back." The crowd held its breath. Vivian looked at the man she had once vowed to love until death. She felt a pang of sorrow, but it was distant, like a memory of a bad dream. "I can't give you money, Preston," she said softly. "You'd only gamble it away or try to buy back a life you never earned." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small business card. "But I can give you this." She handed him the card. Preston squinted at it. "What is this, a lawyer?" "It's a contact for a rehabilitation center in Vermont," Vivian said. "It's fully paid for. 6 months. They'll help you get sober. They'll help you figure out who Preston Ford is when he's not pretending to be a master of the universe." Preston looked at the card. Tears welled in his eyes. "And if you complete the program," Vivian added, "I have set up a small trust, enough for a modest apartment and a fresh start, but not in New York, and not in finance." Preston looked up at her. "Why, after everything I did?" "Because," Vivian said, turning to walk away. "My grandfather was a hard man who died alone. I don't want to be like him, and I don't want you to die like him either." She signaled to the security guards. "Please escort Mr. Ford to the car waiting outside. It will take him to Vermont." As Preston was led away, sobbing quietly, the ballroom remained silent for a heartbeat. Then, slowly, someone started clapping, then another. Soon, the entire room was applauding. Vivian didn't look back. She walked out to the balcony, needing fresh air. Arthur joined her a moment later. "That was exceptionally merciful," Arthur said. "Mercy is a luxury," Vivian said, looking out at the city lights, "and I can finally afford it." 6 months later. The snow had melted, revealing a vibrant green Central Park, a perfect mirror of Vivian's own rebirth. She sat on a bench near the reservoir, no longer the trembling woman shivering in a thin coat, but a titan of industry wrapped in cashmere. In just half a year, she had revolutionized the Wellington Empire. She had purged the corrupt board members and launched the Martha Miller Foundation, a billion-dollar initiative providing top-tier legal aid to women facing financial abuse. She wasn't just rich, she was beloved. Her phone buzzed. It was the final loose end. Arthur's email confirmed that the divorce was finalized, but it contained a surprising update. Preston had completed his rehabilitation in Vermont. He hadn't returned to Wall Street to fight for scraps. Instead, he had moved back to Ohio to open a small carpentry shop, the humble dream he had abandoned years ago for the allure of greed. The email ended with a message relayed from him. "Tell her thank you for saving my life." Vivian closed her eyes, letting out a breath she'd been holding for a decade. She hadn't just destroyed the monster he had become. She had dismantled him so the man underneath could survive. David Thorne, the journalist who had chronicled her meteoric rise, approached the bench. "You've conquered the boardrooms and the ballrooms. Vivian, the city is waiting to see what the Iron Heiress does next." Vivian stood up, adjusting her sunglasses. She looked at the skyscrapers, not as looming giants, but as puzzle pieces she now controlled. "I spent 10 years surviving. David," she said, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of absolute power. "Now I plan to start living." She turned and walked into the sunlight, leaving the shadow of her past behind forever, the master of her own fate. And that is the story of how Vivian Ford became Vivian Wellington. It's a reminder that sometimes the person you think you can discard is actually the person holding the keys to the kingdom. Preston thought wealth was about the car you drive and the watch you wear. Vivian showed him that true power isn't about money. It's about resilience, dignity, and the ability to rebuild yourself when the world tries to tear you down. She didn't just get revenge, she got justice, and in the end, the best revenge really was living well. If you enjoyed this story of karma and transformation, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were in Vivian's shoes? Would you have forgiven Preston? Or would you have destroyed him completely? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.